Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Good morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That music means it is time for the Hillsdale Dialogue, the last radio and television hour of the week if you're watching on the Salem News Channel. Today would be a good day to watch on the Salem News Channel because we're going to talk about the Dardanelles. And this is going to take a map. We're going to try and describe it for you. Those of you who are in your car or who are listening on podcast or a variety of ways, we're going to try and explain it all to you. But I also want to announce, Dr. Arnn, victory, because this is volume 1 of Winston Churchill's 5-volume memoir of World War I, and we are done with it. We are actually putting this down and picking this up, which is volume 2. And it has only taken us a year. And we are resolved to do better, are we not?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'd go quicker if we wouldn't speculate about a hypothesis every fourth time about what's going on in the world today, because who knows? This is exciting. The first chapter in this book is one of the most important things that Winston Churchill ever wrote. And I propose that we read some sections from it.
Let's start there, because why don't you do a general where are we in February? Because the Dardanelles campaign begins in February of 1915, and it will end in January of 1916. And it's the most important attempt at a tactical and a strategic breakthrough that the West will ever mount.
So we're in two places right now. First of all, the war in the West, the largest battles ever fought to that time, has settled into a trench warfare. And Churchill conceives the idea that we should go around because we'll lose our people if we attack the trenches. And the second is it's a fateful year in the life of Winston Churchill because he stakes everything on this attempt to go around. And it didn't work. And he suffers for that politically for 20 years. But he does what he would do, and only he could do in the modern world. He writes a 5-volume book about it to justify it. And the key justification is in the opening paragraphs of the first chapter. Why
go ahead and read.
Go to the doctor. Yeah, he says, I'm going to summarize the first 2 paragraphs of this chapter, and then we're going to read the third. One of the themes of Churchill's life is that affairs, because of the growing power of human organization and modern science, are getting bigger, but we are not. It's harder to control things now. There's just so much. And, used to be if you were a British statesman, you could take the month of August off and correspond by letter and run a major department, and you'd get a letter or 2 a day, and you'd write 1 or 2 a day. Now it's constant, right? And so Churchill sees that constitutes a threat to the ability of human beings to choose their path. It's too much to know, too much to figure out. His solution to that was to, first of all, try to understand it. His solution to that in general was simplify. One of the reasons I'm for decentralized government is that it's simpler. Let parents raise their children. They want to anyway. They'll do it on the average better than anybody else. So the other was in war, it's strategy. And what he does is he says in 1915, a strategic choice was presented to us. Could we contain this conflict so it didn't shatter all of Europe and its countries and its people? Could we have, by some device, found a way through to win the war at affordable cost and relatively quickly? And he says that opportunity was presented in the opening of the year 1915. And he did stake his whole career on it. It didn't turn out, his career was so long, that this was not the decisive thing. But it seemed so for most of his career.
And is it fair to say, until that time, he is the fair-haired child of Great Britain, the son of Lord Randolph Churchill, warrior, war correspondent, and the last charge of the British cavalry ever at Omdurman. He is the first Lord of the Admiralty, very young to be that. He's already held like 6 different jobs. And he's the guy. He's the coming guy. And he gets an old man, Jackie Fisher, to come back. And this is a caution to people who fight wars. Don't go get the generals who fought the last one. So Jackie Fisher and he cook up a scheme because it's a deadlock. As you like to say, from the Alps to the Baltic, it's one long trench and no one's going anywhere. So what happens?
Yeah. Well, first of all, about Jackie Fisher, one of the themes here is that what matters is character, right? Jackie Fisher turned out, I will assert it, Churchill never did, he was not a good man. He was more ambitious for himself than he was for the things under his charge. And Churchill was wrong about that. And, if you think through your life, everybody's wrong about that sometimes. Hard to tell about people. It's the reason friendship is so important, because you meet a few people and for a long time you get to know them and you trust them. Like I can tell you to the listeners, Hugh Hewitt ain't much, but he's not a liar. And
that reminds me of a letter I once sent to a club recommending someone. I said, X is frequently sober, and we shall put aside the incidents of the long ago past. He was admitted anyway.
No, in other words, Hugh Hewitt is trustworthy. I can tell you after 400 years or however long we've known each other, right? So Churchill made a mistake about that. And this paragraph I wanted to read to you, we can talk about it for a week. I've thought about it for years.
Why don't you read it so that people can hear it?
Okay. So the third paragraph in Volume 1 is, although this account pretends to deal with only a partial aspect of the immense theme, it will follow throughout as I conceive the pathway on which footsteps were decisive. See, that's the way we're going to work our way through this book from now on, from 2 weeks ago on. So, in the vast tangle of arguments, here will be found the unraveling thread. In the clash, overbalancing or equipoise of gigantic forces, here were the determining factors. Amid increasing chaos, here lay the potential dominance. Much action in the play of forces, even on a huge scale and with enormous material effects, is often irrelevant and counts for little or nothing in the final result. But along the chain of commanding causation, even the smallest events are vital. First of all, that's a political education in what I just read. That's how prudence works.
Very small things can grow into enormous catastrophes.
And prudence is the difficult job of trying to pick the correct ones. And nobody's perfect at that, but Churchill was good, and he's justifying his choice here.
Stop right there, Dr. Arm. We got to move on. He's justifying his choice, and we'll come back to that point in the next segment of the Hillsdale Dialogue. I want to remind you, everything Hillsdale is over at hillsdale.edu. All of the Hillsdale Dialogues, and there are getting close to 850 of them, HughForHillsdale.com. You can also bookmark it over at iTunes if you want. If you go to HughForHillsdale.com, there's a lot of other things to sign up for, like the free edition of Imprimis, and you don't want to miss that. But if you just want to run through the dialogues from first to last or last to first, and I recommend beginning at the beginning, go to iTunes, type in Hillsdale, and up will pop Hugh Hewitt, Hillsdale Dialogues, the iTunes, and you will love them all.
Hey there. Today I want to tell you about the Hillsdale K-12 Classical Education Podcast. This unique show explains how children benefit from an American classical education. Whether you're a teacher, student, or parent, you'll find something of value on the show. You'll hear from teachers and administrators from schools around the country, as well as Hillsdale professors and friends who are leading the effort to revive the American tradition of K-12 education. When you listen, you'll learn all about classical education, what it is, how to teach it, and why it matters today. And there are dozens of back episodes on specific topics, like teaching Singapore math, reading great books, and even understanding how athletics is critical to a child's development. Listen every Monday on podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.
Welcome back, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway, the final radio hour and television hour on the Salem News Channel of the Hillsdale Dialogue. Always ends every single week. And as we broke the break, we were reading a key passage of Churchill's war memoir, I believe, Dr. Arnn, a particularly fine passage.
Now, the rest of it is philosophic. It is these which should be studied and pondered over, for in them is revealed the profound significance of human choice and the sublime responsibility of men. Now, Churchill's life, as he explains his life to us in his many writings, he's trying to vindicate our ability to choose our course and live well by doing so. And it's harder now, right? It's very difficult now. Huge forces, right? These should be studied and pondered over, for that's where we find human choice and responsibility. But then the last sentence seems to deny it. No one can tell that he may not someday set a stone rolling or take or neglect some ordinary step. Now that's chance, right? Set a stone rolling, miss some ordinary step, which in its consequences will alter the history of the world. So he finds the power of human choice in things that can be powerfully affected by chance. That's what's philosophic, and I'll explain that for a minute.
May I pause and say as well, in the United States, there are very few people who reach the level that Churchill got to where their decisions would affect an entire century. But there are many, and I'm not sure that any of them is as well prepared to deal with any of our future challenges as Churchill was in 1915 to try and deal with Turkey. And he got it wrong, or at least they all got it wrong. And the problem is, given what you just read, I don't know that we have a lot of people who are capable of thinking this way, Dr. Arnn. Do you?
Well, sure. But are they in the right place? That's the problem of Plato's Republic, right? The cities will be miserable till the philosophers are kings, and they don't want to be. But let me say something else about this. I have the privilege of teaching Aristotle to highly intelligent students who want to know it. And I tell them about things like this. This, by the way, is a sort of a gloss or commentary on Book 6, opening chapters of Aristotle's Ethics, where he brings up the intellectual virtues, the first of which is practical wisdom. And we all have to do this all the time, every day. We all have to estimate circumstances and cost and shifting things to try to get towards some goal of doing good and building our characters and living well. And so this unique place in which Churchill is, Aristotle tells us we want to learn to be good at that, and everyone needs to be good at that, because we all have jobs to do and lives to live and families to take care of and a country to serve, and we need to be prudent people. And here's the problem with it. It's difficult, and we have to practice. And Aristotle says in Book 6, chapters 1 and 2, that you can learn this practical judgment by studying the people who have the reputation for it. Who has a higher reputation for that than Winston Churchill, who also wrote so much that you can know what he was thinking. That's why
there is certainly, now we'll get the FDR people and the Eisenhower people and the Reagan people will call and complain that we've forgotten FDR, Eisenhower, and Reagan. And we're not. We're just saying that if you're going to start somewhere, start with Churchill, because he did it more for longer with greater success, fewer resources, and with more stakes than anyone else has ever done, I believe. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah. Well, I personally believe he's the man. But for those reasons, right? He wrote so much. He did so much. He was so reflective. And having said that, Franklin Roosevelt didn't write 45 books. Churchill wrote a little more than that, I think.
That is so astonishing. 45 books. Actually, a little more than that. Dr. Arnn, we need a little more specificity perhaps someday. It's extraordinary. I've done 15 books. I can't imagine, and I don't do anything compared to anybody like Churchill. I don't know how he found the time to do it. What a remarkable man. Coming right back, all the Hillsdale dialogue collected at Hugh, H-U-G-H, 4FOR, Hillsdale.com. Go sign up. You can get them sent to you every week and get Hillsdale and Primus as well. Hugh4Hillsdale.com. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is rolling along. Churchill's back on the table. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, is my guest. All things Hillsdale you can find at hillsdale.edu. That's hillsdale.edu. And Dr. Arnn, when we went to break, you were talking to the entire audience out there, not just people who are reading Churchill, the entire audience.
The argument I'm making here, I'm appealing to people. You have two problems in trying to understand the world. One is there's way too much, and you have to make some kind of a survey of the world so you're familiar with its main parts. That's the same problem in education. What's in the core curriculum at Hillsdale College? A lot of survey of great books, and then intense study of close things. And so if you want to study the life of Franklin Roosevelt to learn prudence, good. Study it closely. I think Winston Churchill is more opportune for that. But never mind. If you really do study the right things closely, you'll learn a lot. And I want to draw at this point about the relationship between choice and chance. Because in the classics, they teach us that there are three things that can cause something in the world that we know. And one of them is nature. Outside I look at my wife's garden, which is very pretty. And she planted a lot of those things, but they grow on their own, according to their nature. And then another one is she could prune a tree. That's art. Art is human action, whatever we do. And we have discretion over that. We're the only thing in nature that does have that. And the third is chance. One of my favorite examples is, because often I teach here where I'm sitting right now, and I can look out the garden, and I said, so let's say that the snow falls on a branch, and it overburdens it, and it falls off. That happens every year here. Sometimes there are power outages, but it's a wire. Well, that's nature that made it fall off. Let's say it falls on somebody. That's chance. They happen to be standing there. The causes of the branch falling and the causes of the man standing there are two different and unrelated things. That's what chance is, the intersection of two causes.
Do you mind an interruption that's got nothing to do with anything, but it's on my reading list right now, and therefore I was going to ask you a question off air. I'm going to ask you on here. We've never done Hobbes, and I have been reading Hobbes and about the Leviathan, and I did not realize he was a determinist. He thought everything that happens was bound to happen. Is that why we've never talked about Hobbes? Because neither you or I are determinists. We're kind of the opposite of determinists.
Well, there's a great... He's not strictly a determinist, but he does think that... so there's in Leviathan, in an early chapter called Of Reason, this quote appears. Reason, then, is but a scout or a spy to range abroad and find the way to the thing desired. See what that means? That means that our passions determine our action, and our reason is in service of our passions. And that reverses the decent and the classical understanding, and Winston Churchill's understanding for that reason.
Have you ever taught Leviathan?
Sure.
Oh, we have never talked about that. We'll have to revisit our list, but let's get back to this.
Yeah, Hobbes is fun. We should study Hobbes.
Hobbes is very interesting. I had no idea. I took a bunch of these classes when I learned to be a lawyer, not a political theorist, and we never did Hobbes, and so it's all new to me, and it's interesting. In this chapter, Churchill wrote, "No war is so sanguinary as the war of exhaustion." I didn't know what the word sanguinary meant. I thought sanguine meant good. And so I thought that's the opposite of what Arne has told me. But it turns out that sanguinary means bloodthirsty.
No, it just means blood, right? And consanguinity means related, right? So, yeah. And sanguine, like my grandchildren, I have 2. They're better than anybody else's.
Argument.
And it's happy to me that they're related to me because, wow, are they not beautiful? And so sanguine is good, right? But then, on the other hand, bloodletting in war is not good, unless perhaps it's Adolf Hitler and his forces. So, yeah, that sanguine is a very strong term.
And you want to avoid a war of exhaustion. That's what Churchill says here. And Ukraine is right now in a war of exhaustion with Russia, which I would add, they cannot actually win unless Putin is persuaded to withdraw. Because there's just not enough Ukrainians versus Russians, I think.
Yeah, I don't see where this goes. And I wish they could make a peace and Russia could stop this flirtation with Iraq and with China. And, I have friends who argue, and I don't know the story, and that's one reason I don't have a hard opinion about this thing, except that it doesn't look like it's going well to me, and it looked to me like it might not. Because if you go back to your map, look at the globe. We need a globe here.
My globe is in my Relief Factor studio in Maine, unfortunately. It's not here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we should put,
There's the battle.
We're going to get better.
That's the battle.
I think, yeah, but that's, you need to look at it in context, right? And so if you look at, get a big map of the world right now and look at it, right? And if you look at a view of Western Europe stretching down to Africa and parts of Asia, you will see that, and put Moscow right in the middle of your map. Just imagine this for a minute, right? First of all, you will see that Moscow is nestled in the middle of a bunch of land, right? It's a long way from anywhere. And the history of Russia and Russian greatness is attempts to get out. It's never been very good at that, by the way. On the other hand, going there has been a fool's errand for everybody who ever tried it. You can't do it, right? And so this idea, this light talk of a regime change in Russia, they just have an old story of getting really tough when you get close to Moscow.
Amen.
And so and Churchill, fearing the Soviet Union above all after Hitler was destroyed and before Hitler arose, both times he feared them above all. He always regarded Russia as a real thing and a naturally strong thing.
And as we should, because it is and remains. A few paragraphs down, Churchill writes, battles are won by slaughter and maneuver. The greater the general, the more he contributes in maneuver, the less he demands in slaughter. So the rest of this book is about that. Am I not correct?
So those words, that's my other most important paragraph right there. So it's worth reading that with some care. And because Hugh interrupted me because he's not a very good student, I want to complete my point about choice and chance. And that is to say, your choices that you make in your life occupy the same space outside nature as chance. And that means a prudent person never thinks he can control everything. And so you make allowances all the time. And you keep a margin of safety. And you're bold when you have to be, but you reserve and save. I'm proud to think that Hillsdale College is going to go on for a while. I do hope so. And I'm very reluctant to take risks with it. See, because chance and choice, they both stand outside the natural processes, and they sort of occupy the same space. And Churchill, understanding that, he's bold here because he wants to bring all that to a close, because it is, even if we win, it's going to be fatal to great things. We should try to avoid that and be bold, but also remember, you're not ever going to perfect the world, right? So much of our politics today is driven. In fact, you brought up Hobbes. Hobbes is in a line that starts with Machiavelli.
Yep.
And one of their ideas is to eliminate chance. Machiavelli writes, fortune is a woman, and she must be thrown to the ground and mastered, right? You see no sentiment like that in Winston Churchill. That's one reason why when he writes about these things, he's reluctant ever to go all the way, right? Let's kill all the Germans, right? They're mad at him. The Germans have done terrible wrong here, right? He didn't say that. And so that's, in other words, don't think that you're God when you make your calculations, because God has a sense of humor. He's imposed chance on us.
It's very
remembering all
interesting.
that,
he never says anything about the Turks remotely as harsh as he says about the Bolsheviks, and he never says about the Bolsheviks anything remotely as harsh as he says about Hitler. He kept his adjectives well organized, and he did not deploy them easily.
So that's true, except that he did speak equally harshly about the communists as he did about Hitler when he could.
Before and after, right?
But Churchill did not want to fight Russia.
He did not want to fight Russia. Hold it right there, Dr. Arnn. We'll come right back and pick up. Nobody ever wants to fight Russia. You're out of your mind to want to fight Russia. We're watching in Ukraine right now. Why? They do not value human life. They do not value the lives of Russians, and they throw them in the meat grinder. Nobody wants to fight Russia.
Hey, it's Scott Bertram, and I've got a challenge for you today. Become a better educated American citizen. And to help you do just that, we at Hillsdale College have our free online courses available for all who wish to learn. Our challenge? Take just one of our courses. There are so many to choose from. You can discover the beauty of the Bible in the Genesis story, study the writings of C.S. Lewis, or explore the true meaning of America in Constitution 101. We have dozens more to choose from, and all these self-paced free courses feature Hillsdale faculty and scholars, many you've heard on this podcast. So visit hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE, and pick one of the more than 30 free Hillsdale courses. I hope you'll accept my challenge. Pick whichever course you like and become a more educated citizen today. Go to hillsdale.edu/course, COURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/course.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt reminding you, do not forget to vote if you're living in Michigan, if you're living in South Carolina, if you're listening to me in Detroit, you're listening to me in Charleston, anywhere in either of those states. You got to vote. If you haven't voted tomorrow or primary days, let's find out what you think. It'll be primary number 2 and 3. Iowa, New Hampshire. Now we go to South Carolina and Michigan. Do not forget to vote. Get out there and vote. I'm back with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale can be found at hillsdale.edu. Every prior Hillsdale dialogue, hundreds of them, HughForHillsdale.com, HughForHillsdale.com, or go right over to iTunes and type in Hillsdale, and it'll pop up. Don't forget to go and find all the video courses at hillsdale.edu as well. Back to you, Dr. Arnn.
You've grown fond of Poland. The Polish government in exile in the Second World War is in London, and Churchill is the prime minister. And he didn't give that guarantee to Poland. that led Britain into the war. But he sees after the Battle of Stalingrad, those Russians are going to come and they're going to take Poland. And he says, he urges the Polish leaders, which they never did, wouldn't have worked anyway, we now know, you got to make a deal with them right now. It's far away before they get to Poland. Be too late then. Give them a bunch of land in the east, and we'll give you land in the west at the expense of Germany. And the Polish government says, we're an elected government. We can't be giving our people over to the Soviet Union. And Churchill says, you're not going to have any choice. And Michalewski, who later ends up a member of the Polish Politburo under the Soviets, he says, but you and the United States have major forces in Europe today, the biggest armies we ever raised, both of us, right? Churchill said, it would be lunacy to think that we will fight the Soviet Union in Poland. See? So, in other words, calm yourself down here a little minute, right? What can you do?
Prudence.
Now,
Prudence.
That understands, the restraints of nature and choice are serious. And that means that you make plans that are constrained, right? Hitler couldn't constrain his plans. The reason Stalin was the most formidable evil man in the Second World War is that he very much could. He did. He worked wonders of a horrible nature. But he did it in part because, he drove out Trotsky and then killed him because Trotsky wanted world revolution all the time. And Stalin wanted, no, let's be prudent. Let's save what we can.
To underscore that prudence, Stalin did not declare war on Japan until, a month before the end of World War II? He never wanted to get into a war with Japan.
He made a deal with Hitler to carve up Poland. He did that. But then he waited until the Germans had done all the work. And then he went into Poland and took what he wanted. See, he's a very cagey guy.
He was sinister guy. But when we come back, we're going to go.
One of the worst people ever lived. Now you got to read that, because this is a guiding thing that we need to learn in America, because we do a lot of very expensive things, and even if they worked, would we get enough back to pay for them, to make it worth the while? And, in a string of countries and wars, they have not worked. And here's Churchill writing, this is the key to understanding military strategy. Battles are won by slaughter and maneuver. The greater the general, the more he contributes in maneuver, the less he demands in slaughter. The theory that has exalted the battle of slaughter is contradicted by history and would be repulsed by the great captains of the past. Nearly all the battles which are regarded as masterpieces of the military art, from which we have been derived the foundation of states and the fame of commanders, have been battles of maneuver, in which very often the enemy has found himself defeated by some novel expedient or device, some queer, swift, unexpected thrust or strategy. In many such battles, the losses of the victors have been small. Now, we in America are very good at that as regards technology. And we have fought some big wars in Iraq and twice in Afghanistan, and we've taken small casualties. The trouble is, we're teaching our enemies to fight that way too. And you can do a lot of damage with a rocket-propelled grenade or a light missile. And so the point is, we should always be thinking, remember, we're relative to the rest of the world, we're a little country. We need leverage, and we need to find ways to fight when we have to fight that win as quickly and cheaply as possible.
And do not bankrupt the country. When we come back next week, the Battle of the Dardanelles is about Churchill's effort in 1915 to win relatively quickly and at relatively much less slaughter than had already occurred on the Western Front. That's it for this week's Hillsdale Dialogue. We'll be back next week with the Dardanelles and maps, more maps. Don't miss it. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Jen Alisi. Most of all, thank you, Dr. Larry Arnn. Everything Hillsdale is at hillsdale.edu. All the dialogues at hughforhillsdale.com, and I will talk to you next on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.